Commissioners. Commissioner Barton will join us here in a second. And the next item on our agenda is item 12-0688, which is the preparation for the final deliberations. There are 15 minutes calculated for that. And then we've got 15 minutes for report. I'm actually going to add, as Chair Richardson of the subcommittee, being help me with the next item as well. And then we've got in our reports, Commissioner Barton wanted to talk about meeting length, and then we do have our minutes that if we've had a chance to go over those, hopefully those won't take too much time. But I do want to get to the next topic at hand. We've got the November 5th meeting coming up, just a mere week from today. Essentially, Commissioners, to begin that process. Oh, I'm sorry. Sticky fingers. To begin our process for the comprehensive plan and the deliberation phase. Commissioner Richards, did you want to start that? If I could talk about land use and what occurred at land use, if that would be helpful. Commissioners, you received an email from me over the weekend that I attended the Council's Land Use and Environment Committee last Thursday, essentially along with staff planner Ray, who did a great staff report looking at extending our work schedule into the first quarter of 2013 for the comprehensive plan deliberations. I believe I got a positive response to that in the sense of looking at what would be 6 additional meetings. I know Commissioners Barton and Parker and Commissioner Horn, I know you were in the room as well. I don't know what time you came in, but I believe we did get a good reception about that. I think there was interest on behalf of Councilman Langer and Hankins for the Commission to keep moving forward. To date, I've not heard any indication of amending that March 31st deadline. It still has to get approval from Council in our charter because that was adopted by Council, but hopefully that will be done through consensus. Maybe November 12th or November 5th if it gets on the agenda.
It's on consent for November 5th.
Oh, thank you, Amy. Perfect. So that would give us a little bit more time to go forward with this. And again, Commissioners, I am not hearing, if somebody else is hearing that the Council doesn't want the plan by April 1st, please alert the rest of us, because that's not what I'm hearing. I also want to portray that Councilman Hankin wanted us to focus on priorities, to pick the top issues. Councilman Langer reminding us that the comprehensive plan is a broad policy document, and in that respect. So there were things that came out of that meeting. There were some things that I'm a little unhappy what I heard from some fellow commissioners in that meeting, but I'm going to save that to my reports later. But I would like to get more moving forward on this item. And Commissioner Richards, if you would tee it up, I'd appreciate that.
Sure. So at the last CPU meeting, we had a discussion and crafted a recommendation for the final deliberation phase process for decision making. And I was expecting a handout or something in the packet that kind of laid that out. Do we have that?
No, we didn't prepare it for tonight. Actually, we're going into that full discussion on the 5th, but tonight was just to talk about bringing those priority issues, bringing those topics to the 5th.
So we're not, I was under the impression that we were approving the process.
No, we're having a full discussion with the full commission on November 5th about that. Tonight was
just the list.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, that makes it a lot easier. So basically, one of the pieces that we came up with, and you'll hear about the rest of it on the 5th, one of the things that we came up with was the need to create a list of topics that we want to discuss and then prioritize them in order of importance to us. And that would be one phase of our work in the final round. So basically, all we're doing today is just, I'm telling you that on November 5th, we will all bring our list of every item that we want, and then we will vote on each item one by one. The ones getting more votes will be ranked higher in priority, the ones getting less votes will be lower. And that's the order that we will tackle topics in our final deliberation phase. And that's if everyone approves of that on the 5th. But so for now, what we want to do is ask everyone to bring those topics on the 5th so that we can rank them.
No, I think this is what the CPU subcommittee worked on. Pretty straightforward. Are there any questions for Commissioner Richards about, again, we're going to have one discussion, but Rob, will let you run this.
Rob, these are, this would fall under number 2 in the establishing priorities, trends or highlights from the public comments.
Yeah, that's right. And since we don't have it, since we don't have this for everybody, I don't want to get into that too much tonight because we're not deliberating on that. But for your edification, yeah.
So is the idea that on the 5th we would be approving the process and voting on that list?
Yeah, so I know it feels a little disjointed, but in order to give you time to think about those topics that you've heard from the public and the community and those that you feel yourself are important and need to be discussed, we wanted, in order to give you time, wanted to introduce that tonight so you could come prepared on the 5th.
Well, 2 points. I believe I heard Mr. Staley agree that there would be a comment response document, which I think would inform any listing of priorities or issues. Do you have any, the staff have any schedule for that document, or do you concur that that's what he said at the meeting?
We have not been informed by Mr. Staley that that's something we're going to be working on.
I did not hear that at the meeting. I heard Friend Heidi refer to the ongoing ads and looking at, because there was a comment from Councilwoman, former Councilwoman Mesmer about how her comments had been tracked to the ads update, but I did not hear Keith Staley or Mr. Hall concur with that, as far as for the comprehensive plan.
I definitely did, so I guess I will have to go to the record and establish that.
I heard that also. I think it came from it seemed from the members of the council. They were asking for that after Jerry made the point that we've been asking for the same thing. That Karen Mesmer said that in the EDS process that it was, she'd been intimately involved with it, but it was really hard for anybody else to track comments. Like if somebody gave a comment, you know, there was no track changes, and it wasn't clear if it was addressed or not addressed, and if it wasn't addressed, the reasons for it not being addressed. And I believe that, Jerry, you got up and said that you thought that this should occur. We've been asking for that in terms of the comprehensive plan. At least some people have been asking for it, and that it was needed for transparency to the public and also just for good public process to be able to track what's going on. And my understanding was that the city council members asked for that. They thought that was a good idea.
Well, I think it'll be important, I know staff is talking right now, and Todd, that is the staff going to undertake kind of a response document on the comp plan, if it's on the July draft or if it's on the final public hearing. For my own concern, it's again the resources that are spent on this. So I think that also needs to be brought forward. What would be the staff time and resources? I'm not disputing the fact that it's a valuable exercise.
Todd Stanley, planning manager. I was on vacation last week. Keith and I only overlapped for about 3 hours this morning. He didn't mention this, and I'm getting up to speed. I've already sent him an email inquiring when Commissioner Parker mentioned it earlier today, what's expected of us and when. We'll be following up with whatever direction he says we're taking. We're just not at a point right now where we can say exactly what we'll be doing or when will we be doing it, because the staff hasn't come together to sort that out. So you've got a lot of questions. Unfortunately, we can't answer any of them. We'll try to get you that information as soon as we can.
Thank you. It would certainly be nice to close the chapter on this ongoing issue for not just for the commission, for the community as well. So.
Okay, and I do think, again, that this would be very important in our discussion of the highlights of public comment, to know what comments were incorporated and more importantly, to me, which ones weren't and why. second point. I'm still concerned by the comments tonight by Gadbois and McCormick. Obviously, it's the difference of perspective, but we've heard from them, and I believe earlier on we did hear from staff on this, a different way of reading it. I think it'd be very beneficial if we had the Department of Commerce person responsible for GMA appear before we get all the way into this to somewhat resolve the conflict. Mike and Holly are experts, but I think that it would be very prudent of us to get a much clearer idea of what the body is going to be doing the review, as I understand it, of our plan, Department of Commerce section on growth management, to appear at our first meeting and lay out what are the absolute required elements and in a sense about reiterating everything that Mike and Holly said, what his position, that is the GMA staff person's position, is on some of the allegations tonight. I think that it's imperative that we get straight ahead on that before we spend time maybe going down the wrong path.
Thoughts, Commissioners?
Are you making a motion, or is this a?
I did
Oh,
not.
I could, but let's talk about that.
Oh,
It's okay if we have a discussion.
I just wasn't clear.
Commissioner Richards.
I'd just like to ask staff, Amy or Stacy, if you can talk a little bit about the process in place now, the plans in place now for GMA compliance. At what point in this work plan does that happen?
Mr. Stanley, this is what
I think this one falls to me.
And am I correct in assuming that Ann Fritzl is our commerce contact?
From day to day, and Janet, their staffing limitations over commerce changes routinely. I think I have to say for them, we're happy to invite them to attend, and I don't know to what extent they can speak candidly to you about what may or may not happen 3 years from now. I'll leave that to commerce staff to decide. But we have had conversations with commerce staff about the approach we're taking. One of the issues for commerce staff, frankly, is their staffing is now so limited, their focus is on the jurisdictions that don't have professional planners at all. They don't have much staff available to try to support jurisdictions like Olympia with kind of questions being raised before you. But we'll ask them to try to address it. The other question of, as we outlined a month ago now, talking about the further stuff to compliance with the Growth Management Act mandates that are deadline of 2016. Our target continues to be 2016 for full compliance and to complete all of the work and various things that have been raised. This is only one of the steps that we're taking, although a critical one. This part of the update, the periodic update. The issue that's running around inside of all of this that I think is not well articulated and which needs to be out on the table is whether or not one should, can, and how you can adopt your periodic update in portions rather than at one point in time. And there are many viewpoints on that. Our legal counsel continues to explore it. We continue to look at it. We are continuing down a path right now that suggests that you can adopt periodic update. The rules of the state suggest that you can do it in phases and not in one broad swath in one evening. And that's the basic issue that runs around it. We have a lot of things to address between now and 2016. And it's nice to have some decisions made before you move on to things like writing development regulations, if it turns out your plan isn't even the plan that you want to adopt. That's the kind of stuff we're addressing, and that was what we outlined, all of those 2 boards I had of 16 steps or whatever it was left to us in the next 3 years. That's where we're at. We think we can complete by 2016. Council willing to give us enough resources with budget cuts? That's up to them, not up to me. But that's our goal.
Questions for Tom? So I think Commissioner Richards has just brought, and again, this is it's on page 103 and 104 of one of our staff handouts here, but essentially for this agenda item and then what we're to prepare for Monday, the 5th. And again, with all the additional written testimony that we've received, oral testimony, so the notes that we've taken, and then coming up with a process essentially that was discussed at both at the Comprehensive Plan Subcommittee and at the leadership team, which again probably leaves out only 2 commissioners, and Commissioner Keisha and Commissioner Reddick are the only 2 that don't comprise those bodies. Commissioner Barton?
Did we finish talking about what Jerry, I mean, we had heard from Todd, but, and we got...
Well, I guess if you had another question.
I just think that we keep getting this issue brought up to us, and we've heard staff's recommendation, but maybe it would be good to bring somebody else into the process, because I've heard it at the Finance Committee meeting, then in testimony a couple times. And the last thing we want to have is we complete the comprehensive plan and then it's challenged. It seems like it'd be easier to address some of these issues up front. And that's my feeling. If there's someone who can give us a little bit more input that would be helpful, I think it's a good idea.
And I think, as Todd noted, we hear what you're saying and we'll be contacting Commerce, but we caution that in the past they've noted that they're highly unable to provide us with one-on-one service because they have cut back. And they've said that we have professional planners on staff, but we will contact them and see if that's a possibility.
I think and maybe providing, again, if it's Janet Rogerson as our geographic point of assignment, with a copy of our schedule, and certainly that she's welcome to come to any of these meetings. She certainly lives here in the area as well. Commissioner Richards.
And I just think it's important to just keep in mind also that we just make recommendations to council, so we don't actually have the power to command anybody to do anything or anything. I think that the proper thing for us to do is if someone crafts a motion that we recommend to council that they do this or they do that, then we can deliver that to them formally. Other than that, our hands are a little tied because we do have a charter and we're not being tasked to take on GMA compliance and make sure that we're tasked with this particular thing and it's in writing and we all agreed with it. So I agree with, there's a lot about this process that is frustrating, but we're at some point, I think, and I say this a lot, but we have to kind of at some point we have to leave the process aside and start really getting the work done. It doesn't mean that we can't, in our recommendation, like I said at the CPU meeting last time, in our delivery to council, I think we need to be very thorough about the shortcomings of the process, and that's almost more important. What we didn't get to, topics that we weren't able to cover, and pieces of the process, the involvement piece that people are feeling left out of, and little things like that, that's what they need to hear. And I think that's important, but I do feel like our time is limited. Even 3 months is only going to give us about 15 or so hours of meetings, and that's not a ton of time. So if we keep kind of spending 30, 45 minutes every meeting talking about process, I think we're gonna lose out, and we're doing ourselves a disservice. So I just wanted to say that again.
I would like to ask for clarification what it means that our hands are tied. We have.
I'm sorry.
What do you mean by saying our hands are tied and we have a chapter? What it means?
By that, I just meant that we don't. We have a charter that we all approved at the beginning of this process this year, and this is what we've been asked by council to do. And this is what we agreed. This is the plan that we agreed on. So there's certain priorities and certain scoping that's been done here,
So
And
should
GMA compliance isn't part of that. So a part of our delivery to council could be a recommendation that they provide some clarity to the general public and about the process around GMA compliance, because there's obviously a lot of questions about that, because we do keep hearing about it. But I don't think it's an issue that we're chartered to study, and Roger disagrees with me.
Well, I want to make sure that Commissioner Keisha,
I don't understand the process. So you are saying that because of those documents, we should ignore public voice. Each time we hear that general public is dissatisfied and that the proposed document doesn't meet expectation of general public. It is something that we hear every time. So you are saying that we should ignore it, or what you are saying?
No, I think that we should, like I said, I think that we should definitely, we should create a parking lot of things that are deficiencies or things that we're not able to cover that we would like to spend more time on, and that be a big part of our delivery to council. I don't think we should ignore it, but I also think that we have a lot of work to do. Goals, policy, vision statements, we're gonna spend a lot of time on those conversations. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. And implementation and all that is a different phase of it, and a lot of that we'll be getting to later, and the GMA compliance comes, and so I just want us to focus on what we're tasked with doing. And
so goals and policies shouldn't be consistent with what general public is saying. It's like we have to focus on goals and policies, and we don't have. I mean, it's supposed to be all consistent, all the same, no?
well, I think there's a compatibility, but in the testimony I heard tonight, I didn't hear maybe somebody who brought up goal, 4.5.2, please put this language. Nobody brought up specific goal or policy changes. There were definitely some wonderful testimony that we heard from the community on ongoing concerns that you're echoing, making sure of other things, but in the sense of policy or things actually to change in the plan, other than the letters we certainly received, Mr. Gretchen and Mr. McCormick echoing, kind of repeating testimony they had given before as well. So I don't think that's what Rob means, that we aren't going to listen to the public. That's certainly not what our charter is also to do that. But I think that the task at hand is, again, to meet a deadline that we've been given by council by the end of March. Again, I think prospectively that we'll get that extension. So it is what it is. I invited Commissioner Horton and Vice Chair Levine. Roger?
Yeah. I've been listening to Holly and Mike for a long time, and I don't think you can separate GMA compliance with comp plan update. I don't think there's, at least, I'd be surprised if there's anything in here that says that we shouldn't be aware of or trying to comply with GMA when we do the comp plan update. I don't know. I mean, Jerry's idea of bringing them in, someone in from Commerce, may or may not be a good idea because of time constraints, but I really do think we need to be aware and be working on making sure the comp plan is consistent with growth management, and I think it's a really important question with growth management I'm sorry. I think it's a really important question that we need to understand in order to keep going. I don't want to go through a whole process and find out that we left out whole sections that needed to be in there. I mean, I want to come out with a good product that we can give to council, not just say to them, you got to make it compliant. We didn't want to take the time to make it compliant, and so we just left out big hunks. But I can't get my arms around what they're saying, and I was trying to establish, like, what is exactly missing that we need to get in there? Is there a chapter missing? Is it just a CFP? Maybe we need a 20-year CFP, and that's that. And kind of the general idea I got from what they said is, it's got to be kind of throughout everything. You need to have consistency and have it all tied together. And that's still hard for me to grasp. And I think maybe that's what Jerry's saying, is that it's really hard to grasp. And there's, very accomplished growth management experts, and I don't want to take what they're saying lightly, and I really would like to figure out what needs to be done. If we could establish that, you know, exactly what needs to be done to the comp plan to make it compliant. Maybe you're right, maybe that needs to be another phase, but I wish I could understand that, get my arms around exactly what needs to happen to make it compliant.
Vice Chair.
I appreciate those comments, Commissioner Horn. It seems to be like this question of, should the Olympia Planning Commission be the body that guarantees GMA compliance? Is it our job? Is it a realistic task for this commission to do that? My opinion is no. That's staff level work, and I'm really sick of doing staff level work. And we're trusting a phased-in process, or we are utilizing a phased-in process, and I'm hearing that there are commissioners who are not comfortable with that, and I understand, and I hear that there are folks from the public who are not comfortable with that, and I hear that as well. And it's weird because you want to know if there's like where's the buck stops here place? Is it that planning commission? Is it that city council? Wait, is it the staff? Or how do you say, whoa, how are we guaranteeing that this is meeting all the requirements of the GMA? And so I can articulate the problem, but I can't articulate like the really, a great approach to it. I mean, certainly, if we could just hear from growth management folks in commerce, oh, darn, we probably can't. They're not really available right now. Well, it's very unsatisfying all around. So I know that for me, the issues of GMA compliance and our approach of plan update phasing is in what is certainly content that needs to be in a transmittal letter to council. It doesn't provide, and that's probably cold comfort to a lot of folks, but it's something that I intend to do or communicate to council that this has been a real struggle the whole time. And I don't necessarily have any other way of approaching it except to acknowledge the hold your nose and deliberate or hope. Deliberate with hope. So, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Parker?
Well, I'm going to switch gears, switch sides in effect, on the issue of timing. If we try to interpret the Growth Management Act on our own, it will take years. It's a detailed act, and a number of court cases and appeals before the hearings boards have been going on for a decade. So it's not just reading the statute, it's reading the court cases. I just am much more, I think it'd be far more efficient of our time than trying to understand on our own to do what Todd has indicated he would do anyway, which is to invite them. And given the nexus between Holly, Mike, Roger, I would expect that they would make time to come and visit us. So at that point, if we have an agreement, and you can, I guess, nod, okay, I'm happy.
I think that's just an open invitation to Janet Rogerson. Or yeah, Fritzl, yeah, like I said, they're in problem, so I think she's the principal. So again, I don't know what date would suit her attendance, but I think just letting her know. I don't have, commissioners, I don't have it scheduled for a specific agenda item from that perspective, so. November 5th would obviously be the most desirable, but that's not very much notice for Janet. Mr. Richards, did you want to get anything else out of that agenda item?
No, I think we covered it.
Commissioner Hart?
Rob, I just want to make sure I understand exactly what we need to do for next Friday, for next Monday, so we come prepared, because I think what you're saying is that's our last chance to get our issues on the table, to get them in the queue to be discussed, because after that, you're gonna kind of schedule them out, is that correct?
It's not the last chance to add items to the list, but it is the big opportunity that we're gonna start creating the list. So things might be added to the list in the future, and I think there's gonna be enough items on the list that we might not get to all of them. So it'll be good to add things to the list as we go, because then that can become the list that we transmit to council. Like, these are the issues that we also thought were important, but we didn't get to cover them. So it'd be good to keep adding as we go when things come up.
May I have a follow-up, quick one? Do we have a starting point? I mean, we've been having parking lot, and a lot of issues have gotten up on the board, so is that gonna be our starting point, or are you looking to kind of start from scratch with issues that we've pulled from what we've done, plus anything else that we think would be appropriate?
I think we're starting from scratch here, and I mean, I'm gonna go back and look at all the lists that we created and make sure that I have all the ones on my list, that I'm bringing, but we're gonna start from scratch and I'll bring our issues, and then no deliberation about, it's just gonna be straight up, go around the table and everybody get a topic and then vote on it and then rank them from there.
Well, this might be a question more for staff, but I would like to see what all our parking lot items are, things that have come up during our, 5 sessions that we've had up till now. So if that could be in our packet, that would help me.
Is that similar to what's in here? That's in this packet, right? That's
Yeah.
all of the requests and
Yeah, it
information.
should be. Amy Buckler compiled the handout, and so every item that was added should be there.
Page 99, perhaps?
99 through 102. Right?
I'm sorry, I don't have a packet in front of me.
Yeah, there's about 4 pages, kind of dealt with commissioner's request as well as the parking lot.
It highlights both the requests that have been responded to and those that are remaining.
So page 101 and 102, Roger, have the parking lot. It essentially covers the September 17th through October 15th meetings. I don't think there's anything that's been added after that on a topic since then.
Well, I guess I should mention the voting process that we decided on also. We're gonna bring up issues, vote on them, and it's gonna take 3 votes to get a topic added to the list instead of the majority. And that's what we all consent to at the meeting. And then that can be the process throughout. If someone wants to move to add a topic to the list as it comes up, if it gets 3 votes, then it's added to the list. So we thought that was fair.
Robin, this is again the for lack of better, the trends and gems part right. If I'm trying to think of how to say draft language, the language that I draft up, how that fits, and that sounds like that's not this thing. That's a later in the process, or
Yeah.
where's that?
Not everyone has seen
Not
it.
everybody's seen it. This was in the
Not been in the
conference.
packet yet. This was subcommittee
Okay.
work here.
Yeah, that's what's making it problematic for me to understand and be comfortable with this.
That's what we're gonna go over on November 5th, so don't look at it yet.
Sorry.
But we're gonna be immediately using it.
That's right.
Yeah. Does not work well.
If I might add, Commissioner Wing, there might be some overlap. So I know that you drafted some urban ag language.
Right.
So you might want to have a discussion about urban agriculture, and you can add that to your list. There's still a priorities list, and so draft language may fall in a different location on that priorities list, but that doesn't prevent you from adding urban agriculture as a topic to your list. Does that make sense?
And that's really, yeah, and then to answer your question, I guess the draft language is a different phase of the final deliberation process. And we've broken it down into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think 5 different sections. And that's one, or that's actually, that'd be number 3, draft language would be number 3 in that. And then the list that we're crafting is sort of a combination of 1 and 2. It'll be topics for phase 1 and phase 2.
So taking, I mean, the urban ag was kind of too easy an example because it's like this thing we've heard a lot about and I draft language. But the case of, say, transportation edits, I got a lot of them. And it is based on testimony, but, you know, did we hear a whole lot about it? Not necessarily. And so is it, how do I make sure that it's on the radar? Does it have to be in the November 5th discussion and getting 3 votes? Or is it able to be addressed via another part of this process?
I think I would ask the question of, when you're looking at your transportation edits, what of those are substantive changes? What are topics? So talking about connectivity, you know, urban corridors. I don't intimately know the transportation chapter, but I think what this list is meant to capture is those discussion topics.
Well, yeah, that's challenging because the urban ag is, well, urban ag transportation, well, it's connectivity, it's, you know, it's different topics, and so that it's just unwieldy to expect this process necessarily to serve edits that are just wide-ranging and chaptering, and these are substantive. This is not like OUs or you know, this is substantive stuff. So,
and this is also a list of topics of things that are addressed in the update or in the July draft. So things that are not, this is not the what should have been in there. This is looking at the changes that were made, looking at the draft update and the topics that we want to discuss based on that. Different phase in the process is compiling a list of things not addressed that we think new language or new goals and policy. That comes after. So that's all. So that's an important thing to keep in mind also. And I think coming with them prioritizing your head. I mean, if every topic we bring up gets 7 votes, we have a problem. You know, so really be clear about it. These are my top 5. These are my these are things we have to do. What do we have to get to, and then what can come later or what can not get covered at all.
Just to clarify, Rob, are new ideas that were brought up by the public in discussion and testimony things that we could bring up as that we get on the list potentially? That would be later in the process. So I guess I am not clear exactly what we're shooting for here. See,
I'm not explaining this.
I think it's meant to highlight what you heard from the public. What did the public bring forward that you heard were the pressing issues that need to be discussed during your final deliberations? And a lot of this will come out of your initial deliberations too. I mean, that was the intent, was to kind of have some initial discussions and then narrow it down. So you're moving to a point where you're narrowing down what are those key issues that have risen to the top through your discussion with the public that need discussion and need a recommendation to council.
do you think this could be just emailed to the commission now?
This is the land use attachment, and I know that Judy, Jerry, and Roger probably got a copy from last Thursday's meeting, as did I.
I don't want to wait till the packet to start getting my brain around this. I'm just concerned too much is riding on that. Plus, I could chair that meeting.
I don't think we'd have an issue doing that. It would be arriving without any sort of briefing, so, but it's assuming, I mean, 7 of you are already familiar with this, so.
I'm happy to answer questions over email
Okay.
if we just even make copies of that tonight and just.
First, and staff can answer questions as well.
Commissioner Barton?
You know, in the meeting, the CPU meeting, we discussed whether the 5th or the week after the 12th, which would have been the 19th, to have this meeting, and we felt, because we didn't know if the city council would approve us having the additional time, we rushed to do this to the 5th. But this also comes up with what I wanted to talk about time with meetings. I'm looking at our agenda. First of all, it seems like not everybody is squared away with what we're going to be doing. There seems to be, you know, a little bit of, well, I wouldn't say confusion, but uncertainty. And then I'm looking at the schedule, and I don't see how we're going to do this. I mean, we're going to have a deliberation on urban ag. Then we're going to be talking about this process. Then we're going to be discussing voting. And then we're going to be doing visions and values. I don't see how we're going to really be able to do that without having a late meeting. I think maybe we need a little bit more time to bring these, our main top items. Maybe November 19th would be better. And that would give us time to discuss the process so that everybody understands it and is on board with it. And maybe, you know, because we haven't had a full discussion with the Planning Commission.
Stacey, can you go over where the extension is in the process right now? It still needs to go to council, full council. Can you give us a timeline on that? And would we know by November? We wouldn't know by November 5th.
Oh, yeah, we got clarification that the extension until March includes a full additional 6 meetings for you. So you can work all the way up until the end of March.
And that's the final, that's
Oh, excuse me, if council approves that
If
thing,
council.
yeah.
And do you know when that's going to be brought back?
It's on consent for November 5th.
Is it
All right.
November 5th?
Yeah, well, they don't meet election day.
Right, the commission and the council are both meeting on November 5th due to the election.
I'm hoping to run up to our meeting and let you know we got the extensions. I think the
So
council.
the problem with that, I mean, that's, I don't know if there's anything we can do about that, I doubt it, but the problem with that is November 5th is an important meeting to craft our final deliberation process. And we could assume that they're going to approve it and craft our final deliberation process based on it being approved. Maybe that's a prudent thing to do, because this calendar is now completely wrong if that is approved. The process is going to be very different. Each phase is going to be much longer. We're going to have, you know, so it's a whole different ballgame.
Well, I think what we discussed, the concept of the priorities was that regardless of how many meetings you have, you work through the priorities in that order. So if you took only 1 meeting to get through priority 1, then you move to priority 2, and you can, quite frankly, you can sit on priority 2 as long as you want until you feel like you've discussed what you need to discuss. But the concept was that you prioritized your work so that if you run out of time, those things at the lower end of the priority list don't get done.
We haven't formalized, I mean, we haven't finalized that, and that's a discussion we'll be having on the fifth.
Right.
And that might come with a different plan, you know, we don't know. Enough people might think that we need to get to all 5 of those things for definite and schedule meetings accordingly.
That's
So,
a
I mean,
possibility.
we have to be open to that. So I guess I want to get a sense from others how we should proceed on November 5th, not knowing the fateful decision of council. And we don't have to get into that, it's getting late and this isn't on the agenda, so we're going rogue, but I think that's something to think about, is how we want to handle the 5th.
I think the commission needs to move forward in, that we as a body will probably not spend more than an hour on the deliberation of the urban ag code amendments. I would think this group could address those amendments within an hour. I'm hoping that then we can move on to the voting procedures and final deliberations. I think that would be quite a task to do both of those within the time period. I could see the vision of values moving down into November 19th. I think the more time could be spent on that prioritization. But the commissioners having a chance to look at, again, these priorities 1 through 6. And again, there was consensus at the comp plan subcommittee that that would be the recommendation for a descending order. So, Commissioner Richards, I could see where the visions and values may start to move down again if we get that time from council. It's kind of like how the shoreline stuff went. We kind of move as much as we can. We know we've got 6 more meetings, we hope. That's 2 in January, 2 in March, 2 in February, and 2 in March. So those will have to be kind of organized as well. So I think we just have to keep moving along, and I definitely applaud Commissioner Barton. Everybody has to be on the same song sheet, or we're not going to move very well in this dance. So, but getting through, we've got to get the urban ag amendments off, and then if that's an hour, and then we give ourselves 2 hours for voting procedures and going through an exercise of prioritization, and that everybody rolls up their sleeves and brings up the top priorities they believe are needed for this comp plan update. Commissioner Barton?
I really strongly, and I felt this in the CPU committee, feel that everybody has to get on the same page with the process, and then we should have a break once we understand the process and decide on the top topics and then prioritize them. I don't know that that's going to be such an easy exercise. To me, it seems like it's going to be a somewhat difficult exercise. And I just think there would be just having everybody really clear on what we're doing and then bringing those priorities forward. And having a little bit of time to reflect. We've been very pushed for this, this whole process. And I think we still will be pushed. I just think it would be a better process if we had some separation between the two.
Commissioner Richards?
I just had a thought about the 5th. If we could schedule that agenda item toward the end of the meeting, perhaps we could know going in, if it's on consent, then they're going to approve it toward the beginning of their meeting. So if it's after 7:30 when we start talking about it, we might know. And then I feel a lot better going into it with that knowledge.
The smoke resident of the chimney.
Right.
I'll text you.
Commissioner Parker has something to say, but I do just want to clarify, it's kind of a technicality, that it's on consent for first reading on the 5th, and then the next council meeting will be the final. Typically, this is not an item that's probably going to not be a final, but I have to just bring it up.
It's by the first reading.
Yeah. You've got community support for it as well, so. Commissioner Parker?
I'm no expert on the council's procedures or even on their schedule. Is there any reason this couldn't be put before them tomorrow night, or are they not meeting?
They do not meet.
Well, that answers it.
It was a good try.
Councilman Lincoln. So, Commissioners, I want to be cognizant of the time here, so Commissioner Moore?
Just because I have my own self-interest here, I want to comment on what Judy was talking about. We've been so busy with 200-page packets, 300-page packets, 400-page packets, 500-page packets, and continuous meetings since Labor Day. I got to admit, I have not read through all the comments. I just have not had time. As hard as I've tried, I can't do it. I'm exhausted, and I would really like to have a chance to read all the chapters in the comp plan and make sure I'm up to speed on all those, and read all the comments and come in and then talk about topics. I've really tried, and I'm exhausted. There's other things going on in all of our lives, and it's really hard with the grueling schedule we've had since Labor Day to really catch up. There's no chance that I have to catch up on my reading, and we have a huge stack of comment letters. I just haven't been able to get through them all. So I guess I'm saying, if there's some way to make Judy's idea work and give us that extra time over the holiday to be able to do the reading, catch up, get rested, and come back in here and then talk about topics and how we want to go. That doesn't mean, for process, that's fine. We don't need that kind of prep time to talk about voting procedures and priority areas, but when we start talking about issues, I'd really like to be as well prepared as I can be.
Meaning the holiday, do you mean after Christmas or after Thanksgiving?
No.
It's the holiday. Okay, well, I don't get that day, so it's not a holiday. So, Commissioners, what I'm seeing in the agenda here is I will propose on November 5th that we do the Urban Ag Code amendments. We do address the vision and value statement. I certainly have heard that as a common thread, that that's the point of departure. So, Commissioner, I'm just tossing this out. That we move the voting procedures and the final deliberations, maybe we talked about voting procedures on the 5th, but having your key issues and that everybody be ready on November 19th to begin that discussion. Hopefully, again, not knowing how much time that would take, you can see then we have also kind of, again, this descending order of then getting into the substantive changes, you know, the scope and so forth, but I think that additional time, and Commissioner Barton, you did mention that at the CPU, and I think I initially tossed that out, thinking that would give us more time too. So how do you feel about that as a board? So that on Monday the 5th, get the Urban Ag off and onto council because they want to take action, and then address vision and value statement. And again, that's a 2-page statement of the beginning chapter. And voting procedures.
Is that comfortable with you? I mean, your comments, maybe you don't want to dive into that.
No, vision, I don't have a problem with going with vision and values and talking about voting procedures and whatnot, but I would like to get time to prepare for the issues discussion. And hope, I mean, I go along with Amy that the 19th would be much better for me.
So creating the list is okay also? The top of the list, you would want to hold off on that?
On to the 19th.
Not do that the 5th, wait, okay. Okay.
Is that doable, Commissioners? All right. So we're going to set ourselves up for success. We're all going to be ready on the 19th, and we'll certainly convey this to Commissioner Reddick too. We've got a little agenda adjustment. Amy.
I thought I heard voting procedures on the 19th and then on the 5th, so which is it?
I think the voting procedures on the 5th, but that the prioritization of everybody bringing the list, that exercise would occur on November 19th. Commissioner Burton?
And we're also going to talk about what we talked about in CPU, the whole process thing.
Yeah, that's the voting procedures.
Oh, okay. I guess that's what I thought you meant, but.
Thank you.